Hello, welcome some of you to our small discussions about the catalyst of progress, Ottoman modernities, and our journey toward modern Turkey. I am Abdurrahman Mukim, researcher of South Asian Studies Center, Institute of Asian Studies, Chulalongkorn University. Thank you very much our speaker, Professor Erhan Doğan from Marmara University. Erhan Doğan, who is the professor of International Relations and experts about the European Union relations and European study. Secondly, Professor Ali Ari, who is the expert about public policy and development economics. Both of them our Hojam from Marmara University. Welcome all of you to hear them. Let me start. The floor is yours, please.
Every modernization process leads to or go in the form of a progress. There would be some slide backs or points where the system stucks into a much more less progressive stance. So sorry for that, but this became an opportunity for us to refer to this dimension of the modernization phenomenon as well. So I wanted to use it as a kind of tool to talk about this nature. And when we talk about Turkey's modernization, we will see that it's not always in the form of progress. There are some slide backs or there are some venues which doesn't go to that much prosperous or better place as it would be thought otherwise when you stick into the original definition of progressive definition of modernization. This topic again is for us, the people in Turkey, is not that much interesting at all because Turkey's modernization has been an overstudied subject. But since I arrived here, I was talking with Dr. Jirayut and we were speculating about making a kind of comparison between Turkey and Thailand. This made this presentation or this talk possible because, as I said, if I made this talk in Turkey, it would be among many of talks that has been done by scholars again and again. But doing this talk in Thailand and proposing that, let's think together about similarities and differences between Thai and Turkish modernization is the most attractive part of this talk, we assume. And I'm sure Dr. Jirayut is agree with me. We were, talking about this issue again and again from time to time. We can throw very speculative questions from the beginning. For instance, I will talk about these speculative things first, then continue with the structured form of my presentation. In Turkey, we have today a lot of people who are very critical, quite critical about Turkey's modernization history, at least some aspects of Turkey's modernization. Some of them call themselves as Ottomanists or neo-Ottomanists, and they are willing or they would prefer a Turkey, modernized Turkey, in which monarchy was not abolished. So, taking that point as a reference and coming to Thailand, you see a country which has been modernized, but monarchy is not abolished. It's very interesting, the trajectories of modernization, what we went through and what Thailand went through resembles each other because, the story is in this way or another way goes quite similar in non-European world. But European world is another story, of course. I will also refer to that shortly. So, you have monarchy, we abolished monarchy. In Turkey, for instance, again, there are many people who speculate that due to the fact in due to the phenomenon in 1915 and in 1922, minorities of Turkey were somehow deported. In 1915, it was a unilateral decision of the Ottoman Empire. It was during the First World War, and Armenian minority of Ottoman Empire were deported within the empire from their original living places to the southern provinces of the empire. Why? Because Ottoman Empire was fighting with Russians, and Armenian population were living close to the Russian front, and Russia, it seems that was successful to agitate and provocate Armenian minority in Turkey. So, in order to prevent a future, let's say, threat coming from this reality, they decided to move Armenian minority in Turkey to the southern provinces of the empire. So they were not deported out of the empire. They were forced to change their locations within the empire. Or if we come to Greek community, numbers are speculative, but there are almost 1.5 million Greeks. There were 1.5 million Greeks who were exchanged by the Muslim and Turkish populations of Greece. So from Anatolia, they were sent to Greece, and the Turkish and Muslim population of Greece were sent to Turkey. So some critics claims that due to this particular reality in the history of Turkish modernization, Turkey couldn't modernize as it could modernize if this didn't happen. I don't know if I could put it right. I don't know if Thailand has a similar story in her history, but it would be very interesting if Thailand didn't experience something like that and Thailand came to this point. Then this argument or critic of the modernization theory in Turkey would also be, a good talking topic for us in the future. So the third point is related with the role of military. This is a much more contemporary problem. During the Republican era, especially after the Second World War, in Turkey, military was quite an important actor in Turkish politics, and they were intervening again and again. And many of the critics of this era rightfully saying that, and this was based on what was written about civil military relations on the political science literature. They were claiming that due to the military's frequent interventions, almost in every 10 years, Turkey could not get democratized as it would be otherwise. Then, starting with 2016, we had another coup attempt in Turkey, and after this coup attempt, the role of military in politics, it was unsuccessful, thankfully, diminished to almost zero. The military doesn't have any word in day-to-day politics, and we don't even know who the chief of staff in Turkey is at the moment. In the past, everybody knew that. I knew it. But now I don't know. If you ask me, I wouldn't remember the name. So this is a very interesting point again. But is Turkey a better democracy now? I'm sorry, it's not. That's another interesting point. This doesn't mean that military shall keep intervening into politics, but these lines, these axes provides us a lot of points through which we can reconfigure our thoughts and reanalyze our systems, political systems. Anyway, let me start. My task is a bit difficult one. I will try to keep it as short as possible. So this is the main structure of my presentation. I will first start with the definition of modernization, what it is or what it is not. We will quickly refer to characteristics of modernization in the European context, which is considered a bottom-up process compared to what Turkey and Thailand experienced. And I will try to go over 3 centuries of Ottoman and Turkish modernization efforts. This is a very difficult task, but I will try to keep it as short as possible. So we will refer to 18th century, 19th century, and 20th century modernization efforts, and then we will come to the conclusion. I will just go over, so I will not get into details much regarding each century, but one point to refer here is important. When you go and read Turkey's modernization history, many of the scholars start with the 19th century. But according to my personal readings, and encounters with this modernization issue problematic, I think that we should go a bit more back. So we should start with the beginning of 18th century, not the beginning of the 19th century, and I will try to show why I think so to you, and let's see you will agree with me or not. Of course, I will also refer to main characteristics of these each century's modernization characteristics. So we shouldn't overread the term modernization. It's a big word. It represents a lot. But I try to take it in quite a simple way. Through this way, I think that I can create a reference point in the history, and with this reference point, by making comparison with its past and future, we can have a much more robust understanding regarding modernization. Modernization, I mean, there are many definitions of it. I'm sure you read, and I'm sure you have your own idea about the term. But modernity represents a substantial break with traditional society. This is my very simple starting definition of the term. When I say traditional society, in the Ottoman context and also in the European context, we refer to medieval era, which also includes the feudal period. So some scholars refer to feudality, some prefer to refer to a wider period by referring to medieval era. So from roughly 5th century to 15th century, this era is representing the traditional society in our analysis. As I told you, there are many aspects of modernization. I will show you in the next slide, but a very important characteristics of modernity is related with the changing thought style or thinking style of the people. So modernization theorists, people who write on modernization, simply claims that before this substantial break happened, people were thinking in different ways. So their mind was working quite and radically different than the mindset of people of the modernity. So when you look to the post-modernization or this after this break time, there you see a great emphasis on reason and you also see that people of modernization era try to and think that they could have a control over the nature and the environment. This is also a belief, it was from the beginning a belief, but this belief increased more and more within the time, and it reached to some points in which they thought that they could control the nature, they could change the nature and environment as they wish. Now we are talking about environmental problems. Perhaps we should find who is responsible from these environmental problems that we are experiencing today. Was also perhaps these early modernizers who were thinking that they could control the nature as they wish. There are, many scholars who wrote about modernization, like Max Weber, Kant, Descartes. Weber, for instance, he was referring to rationalization and bureaucratization of the state or state-like structures. Descartes was talking about reason and the scientific method together with Kant. So these were the scholars, but these are not, these are only three of them. There are many scholars, philosophers who thought about this problem. So key aspects of modernization. This is, again, I try to make as mechanical and as easy as possible to use as an analytical tool. That is the reason I stick into this kind of categorizations. So technological advancement is one of the most important aspects of modernization. We observe a radical social change. I will refer to this social change when we talk about the Ottoman modernization particularly. We see the rise of individualism, which is, again, another important quality of the modernization and modern societies. We see individuals rather than the society. So collective identities gradually replaced by individualism and individual identities. Another important aspect is secularization. So the role of religion within the pre-modern societies was much more than the role that it played in modern societies. With the modernization, in both societal level and state level, we observe a very heavy degree of secularization. Rationalization and science, I already mentioned. Globalization, which is a recent phenomena, but it is not the only globalization that we have been experiencing. We are getting out of globalization of our third, this can be called or labeled as third generation of globalization. We are going out of that. We don't know where we are heading at the moment, but this is not the only globalization we experience in our history. This is identified as the third round of globalization. Urbanization is very much important. Industrialization, human rights and democracy. So these are the key aspects of modernization. You can increase the aspects, you could add 9, 10, 11, but I guess for the moment these are okay for us to start and talk about our own case. So questions for consideration, I partially refer to this. Did the Ottoman Empire and modern Turkey undergo a modernization process? My answer is yes. Were the characteristics and drivers of this modernization similar to those observed in Western Europe? This is a yes and no answer question, because with some dimensions yes, but with many others no. And the future research agenda, which I already referred, can we find some parallelship between Thai modernity and Ottoman modernity, but we will not get into this in this presentation, but this is a topic in front of us, a question in front of us that perhaps we can together focus in the future. Historical context. Ottoman modernization efforts, so we just skipped Ottoman modernization here. Ottoman modernization efforts were spurred by the decline of hegemony and external pressures. So Ottoman Empire was, during its heydays, was a hegemonic empire. I forgot to bring it here, if you check the geographical space that Ottoman Empire occupied in history, and if you compare it with the Roman Empire, you see that they are almost overlapping, except the territories including Italy and Italy and beyond to the west. The rest was almost the same, you know, and of course it is not surprise that when Fatih Sultan Mehmet II, he was the Ottoman Sultan who conquered Istanbul. He declared himself after he got the city as the Emperor of Rome. Why? Because Constantinople was the capital of the Eastern Rome, so for an empire, you know, it was not a big deal to declare, for an emperor to declare himself as Emperor of Rome, because we shouldn't forget that we didn't have nation states, and the term nation was not having the same meaning that we use it today during those times. So Ottoman modernization started as a kind of defense reaction to what was going on in Europe. On the other hand, European modernization began with capital accumulation, technological advancements, and changes in thought during the Renaissance and Reformation eras, and also Industrial Revolution should also be added to this too. So the first attempts of the Ottoman Empire started with the Tulip Age. Why? Because right before this period, you see the dates, you know, Tulip Age refers to the era between 1718 to 1730. Right before this period, Ottoman enlargement stopped, first of all, and decline was about to start. And in, for instance, 1699, with the infamous Karlowitz Treaty, Ottomans lost lots of territories to their European rivals. So this was quite a big shock for them, because up until that time, you know, they were not even accepting European monarchs as their equals. So for them, European monarchs were coming after them or below their rank. But after this date, you know, they had to accept that European monarchs, at least some of them, like Habsburgs, Russians, English, French, equal to them. So what happened in this period? Because they knew that, you know, they were not able to protect their territories, their sovereignty vis-a-vis the European monarchies. So we should make something, was their main concern. How we can protect this state was their main concern. It is referred by many historians. So I will count a few of them. They introduced printing press because they thought that it would help them to make their education system more efficient. But at the same time, they introduced new schools. I will show you the name of the schools. In this period, we see innovations in art and urban design. So in Istanbul, gardens were designed. There were new public buildings. We see in this period rise of Ottoman Baroque design, for instance, which was influenced from the European examples. And they put fountains all over Istanbul. So this was a period in which they observed the European cities and brought some things that they like in European cities into the Ottoman space. In this period, we observe emergence of a Western-inspired elite pleasure culture. This is also very important regarding the Tulip Age, because, you know, in this Tulip Age, perhaps I should have put some photos here. You know, tulip was the central object of this period. So this elite culture or this pleasure culture was valuing, sometimes overvaluing these tulips. So they were decorating gardens with tulips tulips became very important, and it became very expensive commodity as well. And the Dutch tulip culture, it is claimed that, was simply taken from this Ottoman example. And the price of an individual tulip reached to a level that you cannot even imagine, in those times. Some economists use it as a kind of example on their explanations regarding price of a commodity. So they sent temporary ambassadors to European capitals. But again, this era, they made a lot of reforms in living style, in cities, etc. However, this period did not go long. There was, even though it was a peaceful period on Ottoman history, there was a war which started in 1723, 1727. This was the era when the war happened. It was the Ottoman-Iranian War, but it was not the first Ottoman-Iranian War, It was one of the several wars that has happened in the past. Even though Ottomans won the war, there was a very heavy opposition from within the society, especially in Istanbul, to this decadent lifestyle, according to the conservative circles. There happened an uprising, rebellion, and the Sultan was overthrown, not killed, but his Grand Vizier was toppled down and killed after this rebellion. Even, I remember my childhood, in our school textbooks, this era was referred as an age of decadence. Even though there were many, reforms made in this era, because they knew that, their state was not able to stop the European military pressure over the empire, so we should do something was the question, and in order to overcome these problems, they developed some mechanisms. For instance, what they did, they tried to better the TF-based feudal army system, which was known as Tımar Sistemi or Zeamet Sistemi. Zeamet is bigger Tımar, indeed. This was very simple, it was a feudal military recruitment system. Successful soldiers on the war were given some land, and based on the productivity of this land, they were asked to keep some soldiers, train them and make them ready for any future possible war. And if a war call was made by the center, they were obliged to send their soldiers and come together with them and join to the main army. So this was the classical feudal army, traditional army. It was not a modern army, but it was very strong army during its time. They brought new technologies. Ottomans, by the way, were very good in 15th century on using cannons in war theater. However, it seems that there was a kind of slide back on their military capabilities on the field of cannons as well. So they called they invited some European military advisors like Comte de Bonneval, who became a Muslim and adopted the name Humbaracı Ahmet Pasha later. Some others, Baran de Tot, I will refer to him later. They called these guys and asked them to initiate and realize reforms on the Ottoman army. This Bonneval also opened a math school, because mathematics is making the very basis of artillery, so this was also needed. So in order to meet this need, this guy opened a math school. He modernized cannon foundry, the powder mill system, arsenal. We all have names corresponding to these terms. For instance, cannon is cannon foundry is tophane. Top is cannon, hane is the house in which you make cannons. Powder mill, house is baruthane. Barut is powder mill. Arsenal is cephane. You know, we have names for these. So these were not only limited. 18th century reforms were not limited to tulip age and just immediate to the period immediate after the tulip age. It continued throughout the 18th century. For instance, in 1770, Ottoman fleet was destroyed by a Russian fleet in a place called Çeşme. By the way, Çeşme is a very beautiful seaside resort. If you come to Turkey, I would recommend you to go there. Right after this, they thought that, you know, we were also not good. Ottomans were never that much good on the navy, on the sea, except a short period in which Algerian pirates, which were fighting in the name of the Ottomans, were very strong, and they almost convert Mediterranean into an Ottoman lake for some period. But after that, you know, their power declined. So they open up a new naval engineering school in this period. So in 1776, they invited another French, Baron de Thot. He opened up a new school, modern naval engineering school. The number of French-backed military experts in Istanbul right before the French Revolution reached to 300. Can you imagine that? They invited 300 experts to make reforms in Istanbul. However, there was, as it would be expected, there was a very serious opposition, resistance to these reforms. The military, the traditional units of the Ottoman army, where Janissaries were making up a very important mass, they were highly against to the idea of these reforms. Why? Because these reforms were undermining their primary position within the military structure in the Ottoman army. So in every occasion, in every possibility, you know, they were uprising against to the Sultan. And if you check the number of Janissary uprisings in 18th century, you see that the number of those uprisings and change of the sultans reached to a very high number, specifically in this 18th century. So challenges and limitations of the 18th century reforms fell short of expectations. They were facing internal resistance. Establishment in the empire viewed reforms as threatening to their societal positions. Janissaries played a pivotal role, expressing discomfort with radical changes. And overall, reforms achieved limited success due to various factors. So 18th century reforms did not give the expected results. They were not too radical. They were just trying to, you know, save the date, make some little changes. By the way, there is a very important characteristics of Turkish modernization. We, or Ottomans, and the Turks tried to change as little as possible in terms of their social and cultural space structures. So how we can change less but keep our traditional status, power vis-a-vis the Europeans. That was their slogan, motto. There are a couple of very important radical reformers. Selim III, he became Sultan right during the French Revolution, right before the revolution indeed. So while he was in power, the revolution happened, and he could stay in power till 1807. He prioritized military, bureaucratic, and foreign relation reforms. he created a new army. This was a very important point. You know, instead of trying to better the existing military structures, he created a new army, of course, which was taken as a big threat by the Janissaries at that time. This army was called Nizam-ı Jadid, which simply means new order. He deployed resident ambassadors to abroad. During the Tulip Age, we also refer to ambassadors, but those ambassadors were not resident ambassadors. They were temporary ambassadors, but Selim III was the first person who sent resident ambassadors abroad, and his reforms garnered support from French, British, Swedish, and Italian experts as well. However, Selim III faced opposition from the Janissaries, elites, and the local notables, and this opposition concluded with an uprising against his reign. Selim III was overthrown and he was killed. This is one of the very unfortunate events in the Ottoman modernization history. He was quite a bright-minded, radical reformer. He understood what were the problems and he was trying to make this change happen by making some radical, reforms. However, most probably he didn't read the potential of the opposition well, so he couldn't control the opposition, and the outcome was his death and a stop on the modernization efforts. Here you can see a brief summary of the 19th century reforms. Selim III was the first, even though he started with 19th century, but we consider him in 19th century because, his type of reforms were the forerunner of the 19th century reforms. The second guy, came into power after Selim III was Mahmud II. He was also a very big reformer, a determined reformer like Selim III. But he learned his lessons from the fate of Selim III. He built up another army. This army bear the name Asakiri Mansure-i Muhammediye, which means, Muhammad's good soldiers, something like that. So he referred to the Prophet Muhammad. Why? Because if you want to take the support of conservative masses, referring to religion and religious references is an important tool that can be done. So he gave his army the name of this name by referring to the Prophet Muhammad. And he also understood very well the potential opposition that would rise from within the Janissaries. And when he saw himself potent enough, he initiated a campaign against the Janissaries. He simply bombarded the barracks of Janissaries in Istanbul, and they say that more than 15,000, I don't know, nobody knows the exact number, Janissaries were killed in a couple of days without blinking an eye, because he understood that, if he doesn't break the backbone of the resistance to the reform, he could never realize this reform. So he did this very brutal move, and he break the backbone of the opposition within the Ottoman society. We are referring to Istanbul mainly here, because Janissaries were based in Istanbul, and Janissaries were indeed the royal guards. So they were the immediate protection circle around the Sultan. So he replaced this circle with this new army. By the way, there is a very interesting debate on Ottoman historiography. Some scholars, historians, refer to Yenisei's as a kind of political party in the history of Ottoman Empire. Why? Because they were, by merging their power with the elites in Istanbul, they were making a very effective opposition against to the sultans. That was the reason why they were considered as like a political party. But of course, when I first read this, I was shocked. You know, how come you can resemble? Oh, how can you make a political party equal to a military unit? But if you look to the function, you can understand this. So these are the constitutional reforms that took part during the 19th century. I will not get into details. Charter of Alliance, Senedi İttifak, it resembles Magna Carta. Ottoman historians, the second one was Noble Edict of Gülhane in 1839, Reform Edict in the middle of the 19th century, first constitution, because Ottomans became a constitutional monarchy after this date, 1878, and second constitution, 1908. And there were three different trials to restore, reform, and reconstitute the state. I will just refer to this but not get into details. If you ask, I would open it up later. The first trial was Ottomanism. First reformers thought that they would focus on the traditional structure of the Ottoman state, which was a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire. So let's keep Ottoman Empire as a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire and try to make it survive by making the necessary reforms, was their main concern. But this didn't work because many of the Christian subjects of the empire opt for independence by having the support of the Europeans. Later on, Ottomans returned to Ottoman elites. Returned to Islam. Islamism was developed in this era. Why? Because there were only the Muslim population of the empire left. Not only, but mainly Muslim population of the empire left as a trustable ally. So we can focus on the Muslim subjects of the empire was the basis of this political, this ideology of Islamism. And the last resort was Turkism, because together with the Great War, First World War, Muslim nations of the empire also opt for independence, and only remaining group within remaining trustable and loyal unit in the empire was the Turks. So Turkism was developed out of that. When did we start? It is always oh, this shows me the time. Okay, I have to finish. These are the military schools. I will finish in 5 minutes if you could give me 5 more minutes. These are the military schools that were formed in the last quarter of the 18th century and the 19th century. You see Navy Engineering College, Royal Military Engineering School, Royal War College, Royal Military Medical School, Military Veterinary School. They also formed a military public administration school which was called Mülkiye, and they educated the statesmen and finance experts of the empire from within the school. This school was very important not only for the Ottoman Empire, but it was also important for Syria and the other Ottoman realms, because after they got their independence, you know, their first rulers of Syria, Iraq, Libya were graduates of these schools. So these were very important, not only for Ottoman modernization history, but for the modernization of history of the other countries. These were the political reforms. The most important characteristics of these reforms, I will just refer to this Rose Chamber Edict, but the other edicts also bear the similar qualities. Security of life was guaranteed with this modernization efforts. Property was secured, and honor of the people was also secured. A standardized system of taxation was imposed. Fairer methods of military conscription and training was introduced. Equality for non-Muslims was brought, because prior to these reforms, non-Muslims were not considered equal to the Muslims. Ottoman system was known as a particular name, which was called Millet system, which was simply recognizing every religious minority or every religious group, and it was giving them a kind of limited autonomy. So Christians were living in their own quarters. If they have a problem among themselves, they were resolving that problem with their own courts. However, if something happens between two different communities, then imperial courts and judges were intervening. A new school system was introduced. Army was reorganized based on the Prussian conscript system. They created provincial representative assemblies. And by the way, starting with this Rose Chamber Edict, Ottomans started to have local elections. So these were not the local elections that we have like the local elections that we have today. So they were choosing some assemblies from within the elite. So they were elite assemblies. But the history of elections in Turkey goes back to 1839, Tanzimat era. Some claims that it goes even further back to Mahmud II era, because neighborhood assemblies were neighborhood leaders and neighborhood assemblies were started to be elected starting from the Mahmud II period. I will not get into foreign policy environment, which is also a very interesting topic. I think we can find many parallelships or dissimilarities with the Siam case, but if you ask questions, we can go on to that. This reform edict, similar things, it was improvement of the previous edict that I mentioned. First constitution, this was the time where they had elections throughout the empire, and from every region, representatives came to Istanbul and they formed an assembly. It was the imperial assembly. Sultan's power was highest again, but this assembly was given important powers, and these documents, including the first one that I mentioned, Gülhane Fermanı, Edict of Gülhane, they were simply limiting the arbitrary authority of the ruler. This was the most important quality of all these reforms. Anyway, attitudes towards the West, they were trying to change as little as possible, Ottoman reformers. I will just say this and pass, because they were happy with their culture, identity, with themselves. They had very good times in the past, so they didn't think that they should change. They didn't have any imperial period in which they were convinced that they should change their self. So no need to change culture, living style, religion, etc. Names, we are okay. Outfits, why should we change them? But this was also, this couldn't continue as they were wishing. And these are the 20th century. I will not talk about the 20th century. If you ask questions, I will go into them. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Erhan Doğan. So very fruitful for us today. He presentations about the Turkey and many main point he present for us and about the evolutions of the Turkish society belong from the Ottoman Empire became to the modern Turkey, and I think many topic we can discuss later.